right, I'm here on the beautiful campus, Midway University, with Scott McCauley, who we're delighted is with us today. Scott's got vast experience in the financial services world with a lot of direct touch points on the equine industry. Scott, so why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Well, my background basically is twofold. Number one, I am a farm kid, raised and lived on the family farm. I'm the third generation of that farm operation. But most of my career is spent in the banking environment. I started in a bank in a small town here in central Kentucky, then elevated that forward to Lexington in the late 80s. And that's when most of my career was spent, at least in part, in dealing with providing equine financial services to people in the horse business.
Yeah, brilliant. So what specifically would a equine entity, an equine participant, an equine company need from a bank? What kind of services do banks, financial institutions provide to the equine industry?
Well, primarily we were there to provide financing or capital to operations that usually needed that for either acquisition of the farm itself, acquisition of bloodstock, or maybe other equipment involved in the farm operation, or a line of credit for the day-to-day expenses or any ancillary expenses that were seasonal, like stud fees or pre-sale cost, until they could get to it's a cyclical from the standpoint of most of the revenue comes in the fall and winter of the year, and yet the farm operation goes on year round. So we provide those lines of credit for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like any other kind of business, right? That needs access to capital?
Yes, capital is obviously one of the primary things that has to be taken into consideration when you think about being in this business, because it's capital intensive. Because one of the things that has to always be considered is, how do I increase the value of my bloodstock, my band, which helps, and even in the breeding side for the cost of the stallion shares and breeding rights, as I try to move myself forward in the sales process to get a better animal, as far as what book that animal may get approved for in a yearling sale or in a mare sale, and get closer to the front of that sale. A lot of times pedigree supports that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, terrific. And for the benefit of the students, Scott, what's the difference between an outright loan to an equine business and maybe a line of credit, and what kind of different loans might I be able to get if I needed money for my horse business?
That usually falls in one of three categories. We've got term loans that are usually longer in duration than 5 years, that would have been for the purchase of the farm or the purchase of improvements or further improvements to the farm. And that usually would have an amortization that would stretch out 15, 20 years. Then there was a time loan that would be purpose specific to something that would be bought, like tractors or mowers or anything in an equipment line, or even a stallion service certificate might be financed for a 3 to 5 year process, or something where there would be, or mares, where there would be a distinct timeline in which the cash flow would come back and service that loan. Then the line of credit, of course, was annual, and they would run interest only annually, but they would also be timed where that when most of the money would come in the third and fourth quarter of the year, that line would rest and then be available to go into the next year in the non-revenue portion of the cycle.
Mm-hmm. And I know, Scott, you've had clients of all shapes and sizes. And what other products would you provide from them from a banking standpoint outside of lending?
Well, one of our givens was that if you had a loan with us, we also wanted your deposit accounts. And then in addition to that, we would probably offer you whatever credit card needs you needed to cover to have your staff or your office people be able to buy things, whether it be online or through some vendor, and they could use that credit card to pay for that without having the owner of the farm or the president of the farm corporation having to always be on site to approve that. And then in some cases, we would even find a place for, if there was insurance need, to insure the barns or the buildings or even some of the equipment. And then if there was a chance where there was some idle cash, we would obviously be there to help with the investing of that idle cash until the need occurred where that cash needed to be reinvested into the company or the farm.
Mm-hmm. And Scott, what put yourself in the seat of some of the students in this equine finance class, and you've talked to me before about the importance of a relationship with a financial service partner. So what's your advice to maybe students thinking about either starting a business or already have a business or work with inside a business that could really leverage the services of a bank?
Well, I can't stress this enough. There used to be an old theorem in the old days about the C's of credit, but really what it really boils down to is banks, especially nowadays, banks want to know they're dealing with a quality individual. They want to know there's believability, and that they're just good people, and that they have a concentrated effort on doing the right thing, running their business in the right format, and they're dedicated, and especially if it's equine related, they want to know they're dedicated for the long haul, because there's such a ebb and flow of how these equine operations can work depending upon the success of sales or the lack of success of sales. And then the last thing is trying to identify capital formation and what might be available in form of cash or other forms of capital, and yet the reliance on debt. What percentage of that reliance on debt is something that can be handled by the operation versus being to the point that it would basically pull the operation down.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Scott. Well, it's been a great opportunity to chat with you, and I know the students will benefit from some of this great experience. So thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to talking to you again, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you very much.